When I first spoke to Mani sir about the movie, his vision was to create a sonic backdrop through these songs that was experimental and quite different than what has existed in Indian cinema thus far. It felt like it was time for me to take a step in my life that kind of pushed me in a direction and pushed me into the deep end a little bit more. I did definitely draw on some influences from Yuvan as well, in terms of how he vocalizes. Kanne tango rasati Onna kandale nenju muchudum tivali solla nambu mavarasi ompe sollati mala oorukku peyadadi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Film Companion South. So you're turning composer with Vaanam Kottattum, as in film composer.
Yes.
Now, did you just put word out that, listen, I'm looking to compose music for films, or did they just come to you and say, hey, would you like to compose? How did this thing happen?
They actually just came to me. I thought maybe this was something I'd do like 4 years from now, 5 years from now. I hadn't consciously been like, okay, now I want to start composing for films. I'd released my solo English album earlier this year, which kind of quietly made its way around and people did listen to it. And it was quite experimental.
Right.
But I definitely didn't think it would kind of like make its way in the film circuit here, but I think maybe someone had heard it. And I happened to be coming to Chennai for like a quick 2-day trip in June. And I got a message from Shiva Anand, the executive producer at Madras Talkies, saying we have this film that Mani sir has written and that Dana is directing, and we want to speak with you about composing for it. So it definitely happened kind of out of the blue. And it was very serendipitous that I happened to be in Chennai for those couple of days when they reached out. I hadn't really told anyone I was coming. And yeah, so I went to the office, I met everyone. I met Mani sir, spoke to Dana, he kind of narrated the story. And I was apprehensive at first, honestly, because it would be a big step for me to take. I had a rhythm kind of going in my life where I would record songs if I was in the US at my studio there, or if I was here going, and and that takes like a specific segment of the day, and then that's it. This was going to be a lot more like a long-term, dedicating my time, my energy, and everything. But ultimately, it felt like it was time for me to take a step in my life that kind of pushed me in a direction and pushed me into the deep end a little bit more. So
that's what happened. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you about Kannu Thangam, right? It's a fantastic song. It took me a couple of listens to kind of get into it.
Sure.
One of the things that I noticed about it is there's no percussion. I mean, the beat is a waltz. It's like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 going on, but that's a mental calculation that you do.
Sure.
The waltz is not actually there as a percussion.
No.
That's not there.
Yeah.
It's also not the easiest of songs to kind of, the melody line itself, it's not the easiest of things to hum.
Sure.
So what I wanted to ask is the ability to hum a song, or like having a beat in a song, is that no longer a criterion for composing?
I don't know. I think with this, just to even like take a step back, when I first spoke to Mani sir about the movie, his vision was to create a sonic backdrop through these songs that was experimental and quite different than what has existed in Indian cinema thus far, such that the music can juxtapose against the story to create for a new experience altogether. Really, that's what kind of convinced me that I could do this, because I knew that I could make music that was a little bit offbeat and not what you normally hear. So whether or not, a very audible beat or a melody that can be hummed upon first listen, whether or not that is necessary in Indian cinema or not, or Tamil cinema, still I can't really speak on that. But I knew that my goal was to provide a vastly different perspective musically. So what I wanted with this song was to present minimalism. That was my biggest goal. I wanted to present something that didn't have, you couldn't hear like piano chords very very concrete. Normally in songs you can hear like every note, the way it's moving. I just wanted like a little bit of this ambient pad going on in the background that outlines the chords, but you can't fully tell what they are, and for the voice to really be at the center of it all. Right. There's a beat that does come in from the second verse, but that also is quite abstract. I kind of drew from some hip-hop influences that I've been really kind of inspired by growing up. And I wanted to make it such that you can feel the beat, but you can't necessarily be like, I know what's gonna happen next. That was my biggest goal, and to provide a melody that upon 3 to 4 listens becomes addicting. That was what I wanted to do. I didn't want something that was like easy candiness. And not to say that music that sticks immediately is easy. Making that kind of music is actually super difficult. But for this, I wanted to challenge listeners with a perspective that maybe they haven't had yet.
Okay.
So the production decisions in how minimal it is at first, how when the drums come in, what their sonic texture is, and also the actual groove, what it is. That was all grounded in this idea that I'm gonna take people into a different world with this one.
Right. But even when you say experimental, there is still the beat framework of the waltz.
Yes.
So that doesn't change in the sense that from start to finish, you're still having
the meter.
That's the meter.
For sure.
So I'm saying that, is there still some level that you said, okay, I'm going to be experimental, but within a certain box, and I'm not going to push it even further?
Yeah, for sure. I think the way the song started was just me kind of doodling around on the keyboard. I found a tone that I really liked, which is that sound that's there in the background in the first verse. I found that, and then I just started messing around.
Do you want to show us the tone?
Yeah. So that organ-like sound in the background, which is quite soft. So I made that sound first. I have a synthesizer that I've been playing around with a lot. So I came upon a sound that would inspire some melodic ideas, which is how I normally compose. I first look at like the sound that I think is matching the mood of what is asked for. I came up with that. I started playing chords, and then it was just me humming. And once I kind of had a concrete idea of what the melody should be, at least for the verse, that's when I kind of chanced about this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of the groove. So once I had that, then I was sure that this is going to be the meter and the groove for the whole song. I wanted it to be one flow. I didn't want to randomly switch it up in the middle.
Right.
So in those ways, I had a set a parameter that was definitely operating within. That once the flow hits, it's gonna be one ride for the whole song. I'm not gonna suddenly take you into a left turn. Because really my goal with this song was to convey a sense of innocent emotion in a very raw form. The feeling you feel like when, I haven't had any kids yet, but how parents would feel when their child is first born, or when two people that have grown old together, the love that they share, it's very unglamorous. And that's why I didn't want this song to have all that sheen. I wanted it to just be like a conversation with all the natural elements, and each instrument, like that organ, I think is like, sometimes when you express a certain love with someone that you've known for a long time, whether it be a spouse or a parent or a friend, whatever, there's a warmth that kind of washes over you. So I wanted that warmth to kind of just be bubbling under the surface. So again, if you like, so let's say the vocal is the conversation, and that background music is the emotional kind of bed that's carrying it.
So there's this, you don't, this Uruk Payyadari stops, but before it can complete that beat, you bring in the next one, right? So it's like an overlapping conversation? Okay.
Yeah, and it was a conscious decision. It can be looked at from a couple of different ways. It could be looked at as an overlapping conversation between two different individuals, or if you're looking at it just from the perspective of the guy who is saying these things, it's almost like, it was a very conscious decision. It's like he's saying these things, and sometimes when you're having a conversation, this happens to me all the time, my mind is working faster than my mouth. So you want to say all these things, and it's like, especially when you're in the presence of someone you're deeply in love with. So that was kind of the idea behind it. I'm glad that you picked that up, because it was somewhat stylistic as well. Like a lot of R&B that I've heard growing up have these overlapping sections. Mainly from a conceptual standpoint, it was the idea of getting ahead of yourself, because you're so drawn to said person, and you just have all these things you want to say to them. And this song is almost like one or like the main theme of the film. So, and it expresses love in very many different ways. And I think in all its different manifestations, when love is raw and it is, really bubbling, you can barely keep up with yourself. So that was kind of the thought behind that.
Why three blocks? Like usually a Tamil film song has a pallavi, like one block, and then there's the charanam, which is a completely different block of tunes, melodic lines, and then you're back to the pallavi, and then you're back to the second charanam, which may or may not be the same charanam as earlier.
Sure.
That's the traditional thing. But here you have one block, the same block comes later, and then the third block, Shakti Shri sings the same block of. So why three similar?
My songwriting background comes a little bit more from the West, where I look at verse chorus.
Right.
So, there were definitely times when me and Dana were speaking, and he'd mention Charanam, and I'd be like, man, I really don't understand that. I understand Charanam Pallavi in the context of a Carnatic
so
composition.
Many songs,
Sure, but still, when it comes down to I compose from a very subconscious place. The whole album. And it's very present in this song and Easy Come, Easy Go. It's very much starts off as a stream of consciousness, and then I go in and I start structuring it and molding it. It's definitely not, okay, this is going to be the pallavi, then for the charanam, I'm going to veer off into this set of chords and take the melody here. It's more like, do one pass of me and the keyboard just randomly singing whatever, and then going in and sculpting it has been the process. And that's how I always write my music. So, and again, the Carnatic structure of Pallavi, Anupallavi, Charanam, I get that. But I've never composed a Carnatic song, and I've never really thought in that way. So this was, the verse, in my opinion, or the way I structured it is the then the hook is then verse 2 is Rani Kali Samani, and then hook again, and then I go into that bridge, which is that big flourish of all the vocals, and then almost like a post bridge, like a more calm, laid back version of the same verse, but from the female perspective. Coming back to the conceptual core, if you're thinking about a conversation that's intimate, I feel like normally it's in one space.
Okay.
It's in one framework of emotional texture. If you're looking at colors, and I would say maybe I'm mildly synesthetic, so I do kind of see sound in certain colors. And this one just felt like pastel, pinks, purples. And in that way, I didn't want the melody to be switching up too much and go into a whole new thought, because I felt like if the conversation is happening, it's normally you feel like you are floating on one wave. So I wanted the whole thing to be on that one wave, and I was afraid that if I did go into a section that was completely removed or even deviating from this, it would take people into a different emotional space that would not necessarily serve the emotional intent of the song.
Right.
So that was the idea behind it.
So when you did this song and later thought about it, did you think, oh, I can see, because you've sung for a bunch of music composers.
Yes.
Did you see, oh, this actually now that I listen to it, it sounds like Rahman, or does it sound like somebody else? Is it were you able to kind of, because there was one specific part that reminded me of Rasati from Tirira Tirira.
Sure.
Simply because of the a cappella, the type of song.
Sure.
Not necessarily that the whole song is like that, but there were certain things. Did you feel that?
Well, I will say this. So this song actually, it's almost meant to be a lullaby, right? I'll just kind of give you some of the backstory and how it even came about. So we'd been working on a whole bunch of the other songs, and I'd been putting off working on this lullaby because I'd made one version, but it didn't really feel that great to me. Mani sir actually met with me, and he said, I asked him, do you have any references of things I should listen to? Because the lullabies I'd given to him up until that point, or the songs that were meant for this position, felt too normal. And what's been really exciting is every time I go too normal, Mani sir's been like, no, let's keep it where we want it. Let's go all the way with it, So he said, I asked him for some references. What should I listen to kind of get into it? And he gave me S.D. Burman. And I'd never listened to his music before this.
You'd never listened to S.D. Burman?
At all.
Okay.
Zero. And maybe in passing, I'd heard a couple of songs here and there, but I never sat down.
What was the specific song that he gave you?
He didn't give me any songs. I don't even recall specific titles now, but made a playlist. I went on YouTube, Apple Music, everything, and just spent like 3 days listening to nothing else. And trying to get to the core of what his music was, because that's what I wanted to do. Obviously, I didn't want this to sound like an SD Burman song, nor does it.
Right.
But I wanted to figure out if he's giving me this reference. I think the reference came from a standpoint of, look at the intent, how he's used melody, how he's used the different aspects of the sonic spectrum to communicate what he's communicating. And what I realized, the music is quite simple.
Very simple.
The melody is very strong, and the way he conveys that melody is simple, but has a depth to it.
Very strong emotional content.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I listened to it, then I didn't listen to it for a day, and then I made this song right after. So I think I internalized the importance of standalone melody and not having to rely on a whole bunch of other things to take your song forward. That's why there's very, very little, for the most part, in this song by way of orchestration.
Right.
It's very vocal heavy. So in that way, I would say like that was a big influence for the song. Again, I wouldn't say the song sounds anything like
it doesn't actually
song, but at its core, the spirit of what kind of the engine that drove it forward was definitely that reference point. In terms of if upon listening to it, whether there's anything that I can recall or relate to, let's say ARSR's music or whatnot, maybe that Rasati section, potentially. I can play it real quick.
Yeah.
So this is the one section that I think in two ways. One, I made the chords for the section and I orchestrated the strings, and then I had to, I had the melody, like, da, da, da. I had that, and I knew that this could be a really prime position to make something hooky that people remember. And we tried a couple different lyrics. We tried Mavarasi, because that happens early in the song, but nothing flowed effortlessly. And honestly, I wanted to stay away from Rasati because of the comparison, but it just works so beautifully. So we went with it. And musically, I actually went back and listened to both side by side, and they're not similar in terms of like the compositional form.
Definitely.
But the stack of vocals, for sure.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think I was inspired from ARSR's music is the rasati rasati rasa, that counterpoint of a melody taking the same lyric and doing something different. That was something that from a very intuitive space I kind of drew from that. And I think beyond anything else, the spirit of just doing something that sounds different from what's going on.
Right.
In that way, he'll always be a guiding force, just by what he's always done.
Your next song, Easy Come, Easy Go.
Yeah.
What is that? Because again, it sounds, okay, this one has a beat.
Yeah.
But again, it's not an easy beat. It's a 4/4.
Yes.
And it goes in that beat, but then there's like words that tumble in and kind of, it's almost like, that in a Carnatic composition, supposing you have a Tanya Uttaram section and the two percussionists are jamming with each other, and they're following the same beat framework, but then they're kind of doing more within the same section.
Yeah, sure.
How did that come about?
So this one actually started with the drums. I first programmed the drums, and I had like this vocal like sample that is like kind of running through the whole song. It's very kind of distant. And this was in the initial set of sketches that I sent Dana and Manisar, and they loved this idea. And at that point, it was just me with some garbled gibberish and the drums in that sample. So when I had to go into structure it out, if you look at the lyric video, or I'll just bring it up real quick, it's Aishwarya Rajesh with these two guys, with Shantanu's character and Amitash's character. The core of the song, what they briefed me, is to kind of express the liberation and the freedom of Aishwarya Rajesh's character, whose name is Manga in the movie. And so when I thought about that for a while, and I feel like, women empowerment is like an in thing right now in films. And I wanted to stay as far away from any cliches as possible, because I feel like anything cliched is kind of counterintuitive to the idea of any kind of empowerment. So what I wanted to create was something that was just like almost like a piece of modern art, like in that like it didn't follow any specific structure melodically,
Right.
and it had these random flourishes of melodies coming in at random points. That was like the core, like what anchored me down in this song. Then in terms of how like the melody built, I think the section you're talking about, the Kai Pidite, I'll play it real quick.
Yeah.
So it was almost like you that Seviri Venkadal. I mean, it's like a pretty simple,
Right.
you know. And right when people start feeling like, okay, I understand where this is going, I wanted to like quickly smack them across the face with something that kind of came out of nowhere. That was mostly just a stylistic decision.
Okay.
It wasn't like super like cerebral. Like I was like, okay, now I need to make sure they feel unnerved. It was more like that kind of grounding conceptual idea that the whole song should be something that is unexpected,
Right.
was pushing it forward.
Again, going back to your original brief of experimental.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
for sure, and especially for this one because of what, and you know, you'll see it when the film comes out, but what it's associated with and the kind of energy that it's associated with, I just wanted to make sure that at no point it felt comfortable.
Okay.
I wanted just the edge to be very present, both in terms of the production, the tones, and then also the way the melody moves. Because randomly after this section, not after this one, but when the easy come, easy go, that also kind of springs out and jumps out at you. So I wanted enough of those moments that keeps people on their toes.
So what's the difference between the music that you would compose for a Sid Sriram album versus like if you get to be a Tamil film music composer? Do you put on a different hat and say, okay, I'm composing music for a Tamil film, so I've got to do these things? Because sometimes it's director driven as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, this is not you composing because you want to put out your voice.
Sure.
It's also because you want to serve somebody else's vision.
Yeah, for sure.
So you see that creating some kind of conflict within you?
No, actually, well, one, like I've said before, their vision for the music of this film from the jump was something that was different, right? So at no point through this process have I felt like I have to conform to any musical constructs that are normally used in Tamil cinema. And that's not to say that I love those constructs.
Right.
But for me personally, I knew that if I was going to do this, I wanted to provide a perspective that's just outside of what you normally hear.
Right.
So that freedom has not only been given to me, actually, I've been pushed to really embrace that freedom.
Right here in this album, what
Yes.
I'm talking about, you said that you were planning to become a composer in about 4 years' time.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that if somebody says, okay, just give me a set of like folk songs that are, or like rural melodies, like you'll find in a Shiva Karthikeyan film, for instance, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very hummable. They're very popular.
Sure.
Would you be?
I don't know if I'd be the guy. Like I think maybe at some point, maybe it'll be like a good challenge for me to have. But right now, where I'm at creatively, like I mean, speaking to this process though, like that easy come, easy go. In the first version of this song, there was no hook.
Okay.
There was nothing. And like I'd kind of worked on it all night because I had to go to shoot. And then I came back early the next morning and then I came and listened to it. He said, it's good, but it needs an energy push at some point, So I took a quick lunch break and then the first thing that came out of my mouth when I put the headphones on, turned the mic on, was that it was just like, and they went to shoot with that. They didn't even have lyrics for it at the time. But it had the energy it needed, right? So, I mean, what's been cool about this specific process is whereas normally I won't say I'll compromise and let myself kind of like cut corners, but there's certain things that being so wrapped up in a song, you're not going to think about.
Right.
You're going to fall in love with everything about it and be like, yeah, it's fine. But when you're working and making music for a film that is spearheaded by someone else, and you are forced to think of things that you wouldn't normally think about, and that has been is actually refined my creative process. Now, speaking about if I could go and deliver on what is normally heard in Tamil cinema. Yeah, maybe I'm not the guy, at least not now, not for the next 2 years, I can say confidently. I'm going to be in a space where I'm going to want to experiment a whole lot.
Okay.
Because that's what brings me creative satisfaction.
Right.
And at the end of the day, anytime I am a part of anything creative, whether it be singing for someone else or making music for a movie or making music for my own album or singing, there has to be a deep sense of creative drive, satisfaction, push. You know, if I don't have that, then there's no point.
So how do you explain the fact that you're a Carnatic singer
Yeah.
and you're singing somebody else's compositions
Yeah.
and you're adhering mostly to what they've done and getting to experiment only in specific parts of the composition versus this where you seek this freedom? How do you explain the...
Well, I find my freedom in Carnatic music in a different way, I would say. Because one thing I can't ever do, and I'll come to the Carnatic bit, one thing I will never ever be able to do is someone say, I need a song that sounds like that, make it for me.
Okay.
I won't do that. It just doesn't sit right with my spirit. But in Carnatic music, these songs are, the aesthetic of them and the parameters that have already been set are things that I deeply love.
Right.
You know, so, and those compositions and the way in which they dovetail into the improvisational sections of a concert, that provides me with an infinite ocean of things to draw from, where I can really show my personality and the genius of those compositions, both the Trinity and post-Trinity. There's so much scope for you to interpret it. Like, you take, let's take Orangasai Kamboji, right? I've heard recordings of Madhuramani singing it, Samanguri Srinivasaya singing it, M.S. Subbalakshmi singing it, M.D. Ramanathan, whoever, everyone sung that composition. And in such different ways, where you can't even, the only similarity in interpretation is the actual bare bones composition.
Right.
Other than that, they have breathed their own life into it to such an extent that you hear their identity in it.
So that's the thing. For you, your personality comes.
100%.
Right.
And my favorite composers on the film side have done that. You take A.R. Sir, Raja Sir, MSV Sir, composers from the West. Like, composers I love are Philip Glass, Raichi Sakamoto, Morricone. You know, like, these guys, you listen to 10 seconds of a song and you know whose it is.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to that point yet in terms of like my composition for film, since this is my first foray, but I do plan on continuing on this path, you know, as it seems right, and that's my biggest thing. I want to make my sound.
Great.
Yeah.
So thank you for this, because it's not easy to talk about music or composing because it's the most abstract of arts, and and it's also, you know, a lot of instinctive things, you know, you can't verbalize them easily.
Sure.
So, but I think you did that very
Thank
well.
You.
So
I will just
so
say
much.
one thing. This song was definitely drew from a lot of influence from Rahman sir. Especially, like, I'll just play the beginning flourish of it. Just that whole beginning section was something that I was thinking about him a lot while. Mainly the way the drums have been programmed. Like, there's a certain energy he has in his song that I really wanted to attempt to try to. Just that bit. I didn't realize it when I was making the song, but after listening to it right before we mastered it, I did definitely draw on some influences from Yuvan as well, in terms of how he vocalizes, the way I sang this song. And I didn't realize it until afterwards. I listened to it, I was like, wait, this reminds me, tinges of it remind me of the way he sings. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, this is Sid Sriram. You are watching me on Film Companion South. Please do share, like, and subscribe.